Hello everyone, I'm Trisha Awit and I'm going to discuss about sexual harassment. So harassment and sexual harassment are recognized as form of discrimination on the grounds of sex and thus are contrary to the principle of equal treatment between men and women. This is according to Nam User Henning and Lolom 2012. So, like many other crimes, sexual harassment is all about power, control, and domination. According to International Labor Organization or ILO 2002, sexual harassment is a sex-based behavior that is unwelcome and offensive to the recipient. Thus, sexual harassment is not merely a problem of safety and health, acceptable working conditions, but is also a form of violence primarily against women. Also from Philippine Republic Act number 7877 or the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995, work, education, or training related sexual harassment is committed by an employer, employee, manager, supervisor, agent of the employer, teacher, instructor, professor, coach, trainer, or any other person who's having the authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in a work or training or education environment, demands, requests, or otherwise requires any sexual favor from other regardless of whether the demand, request, or requirement for submission is accepted by the object of the said act. So whenever is your status, there is no exception in this act or law. So let's go to theoretical perspective of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment cannot be understood from the perspective of single theory, but it is always a combination of different predictors, according to Sheets and Raver 1999. Previous researchers have looked at sexual harassment being a number of frameworks including organizational approach, feminist theory, role theory, and attributional models of sexual harassment. However, all these models share common basic assumptions and can be labeled as sociocultural models of sexual harassment according to Sheets and Raver. So, sociocultural models, it is how people interpret the world, the community, and the other people, and including themselves. However, there have been 5 widely accepted theories of sexual harassment that attempt to explain the phenomenon from different angles and perspectives. The first is the natural biological theory. Men have stronger sex drives and therefore biologically motivated to engage in sexual pursuit of women. Thus, harassing behavior is not meant to be offensive or discriminatory, but it is a merely result of biological urges, according to Tangri, 1982. So, its assumptions includes natural, mutual attraction between men and women, a stronger male sex drive, and men in a role of sexual initiators. A key strength of the natural biological perspective is that it acknowledges the innate human instinct, potentially driving sexually aggressive behavior. So as we observe, the number of men engaged in a sexual behavior is greater than women. This is because of their natural instinct in sexual behavior is stronger, that makes them more aggressive, that sometimes leads them in harassing women. So the next is sex role spillover theory. The proposition of irrelevant gender-based role expectations that individuals bring the workplace in guiding their interactions with women. Men hold role perceptions of women based on their traditional role in the culture. This is according to Barbara Gothic, 1982. So for example, when women take jobs outside of their traditional to work in a male-dominated workplace, men rely on this gender-based expectation when interacting with women. Therefore, perceiving women in is their greater role over and above their work role. Therefore, men are likely to sexualize their experience, including work experience, and are therefore more likely to make sexual remarks or engage in sexualizing behavior, thus accounting for the fact that women experience more sexual harassment than men. This is according to Barbara Gotti in 1982.
Good morning, everyone. I am Reyna Mae Zamora. So I will continue reporting lesson 21. So there are 5 theoretical perspectives of sexual harassment. So the 2 theoretical perspectives was discussed with a previous reporter a while ago, and now I will continue reporting the 3 remaining theoretical perspectives. So the third one is organizational theory. So in this theory, proponents of this theory propose that one of the central concepts that helps to explain sexual harassment is power. It is according to Cleveland and Kirst 1993. So also from Gruber 1992, this theory proposes that sexual harassment results from opportunities presented by power and authority relations which derive from hierarchical structures of organizations. So from those insights by different authors, we can say that in this theory, or for example, in this theory, I am working as an analyst for 3 years at a company. So at a recent work function, my boss, Ronald, made inappropriate advances towards me, so which I refused to accept. So the next week, I was called into a meeting with Ronald, and I was told that if I wasn't okay with his behavior, I would never advance in the company. So note that in this scenario, this is sexual harassment because Ronald uses his power and authority to threaten me. So he uses his power and authority in his own advance. Okay. The next theory is sociocultural theory. So according to this perspective, sexual harassment is a logical consequence of gender inequality and sexism that already exist in society. So, sociocultural theories examines the wider and political context in which sexual harassment is created and occurs. So this theory asserts that women's lesser status in the larger society is reflected at the workplace. So thus, male dominance continued to be the rule. So example is women perform most of the child care than men. So given that men are more likely to hold higher status jobs than women. So the last theory is the feminist theory. So sexual harassment exists of the views on women as the inferior sex, but also sexual harassment serves to maintain the already existing gender stratification by emphasizing sex role expectations. So in this theory, women were viewed as an inferior sex. So according to the feminist perspective on this theory, so sexual harassment is linked to the sexist male ideology of male dominance and male superiority in the society. So feminist or sexual harassment as the product of gender system maintained by a dominant normative form of masculinity. So in this theory, it emphasizes that women is the inferior sex because they hold less higher jobs than men in the society. Relevance of sexual harassment. So harassment and sexual harassment are recognized as a form of discrimination on the grounds of sex, thus are contrary to the principle of equal treatment between men and women. So all All in all, so an interpretation of these theoretical perspectives reveals that both biologically as well as socioculturally, men have to have always occupied a dominant position over women in societies, of which the workplace are only a part of. So, therefore, the vulnerability of women as a weaker sex has traveled towards workplace and academe, so where it is considered natural and normal for men to be responding sexually and towards women as colleagues, subordinates, and superiors.
Okay, so good afternoon everyone. My name is Reahlyn Vormittag, and I'll be discussing the Philippine laws on sexual harassment as the continuation of the lesson 21. So, okay, Republic Act number 7877 or the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995 is the governing law for work, education, or training related to sexual harassment. So, sexual harassment, which has been declared illegal in the employment, training, or an education settings, shall not be allowed since it violates a person's dignity or human rights. So we have here the work-related sexual harassment is committed when the sexual favor is made as a condition in the hiring or in the employment, re-employment, or continued employment of the said individual, or in granting said individual favorable compensation, terms, conditions, promotions, or privileges, or refusal to grant the sexual favor results in limiting, segregating, or classifying the employee which in any way would discriminate, deprive, or diminish employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affect the said employment. Second, the above acts would impair the employee's right or privileges under existing labor laws, or the above acts would result in intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the employee. So, sexual inappropriate jokes, offensive language, personal insults, and display of contempt or intolerance for a specific race are all examples of workplace harassment. So, abuse can range from making fun of workers, accent to psychologically, fun of workers' accent to psychologically threatening coworkers through threats or exhibition of discriminatory symbols. So, yeah. There are two types of workplace sexual harassment. First is the hostile work environment. Hostile work environment sexual harassment, an action that must sufficient offend, humiliate, or distress the worker in the workplace. So, the hostile work environment are those unwelcome, touching, catcalling, sexually themed jokes, sexually oriented insults and vulgarities, and merely gazing at an employee's body are all examples of hostile environment harassment. Next is the quid pro quo sexual harassment. Happens when a supervisor or other manager asks or demands sexual contact from you in return for employment benefits or promotion. So, for example, if your supervisor promises you a promotion or something na maka-benefit ka if you have sex with him or her, then that is quid pro quo, and it is illegal. So, even if wala ka ni say no, it could still be sexual harassment if you feel pressured to have sexual contact because you were embarrassed to say no and afraid of mawatan kag trabaho or hadlokak of being punished at work. So your sexual contract could have been illegal harassment. So your gender status does not have to be the only reason you were picked out for their discriminatory treatment, but it must be a significant factor to everyone. Yes. And on the other hand, education or training related sexual harassment is committed when against one who is under the care, custody, or supervision of the offender, against one whose education, training, apprenticeship, or tutorship is entrusted to the offender, when the sexual favor is made a condition to giving of a passing grade or granting of honors and scholarships or the payment of stipend, allowance, or other benefits, privileges, or considerations, or when the sexual advances result in an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the student, trainee, or apprentices. So in this, a person who instruct or the one who causes another person to do a sexual harassment act, or the one who collaborates to commit the act without which the act would not have been committed, is guilty of sexual harassment and will also face legal consequences. And yeah, so let's now proceed to sexual harassment in the civil service. Sexual harassment in the civil service is punishable by Civil Service Commission number 010940, also known as Administrative Disciplinary Rules on Sexual Harassment Cases. So, sexual harassment may take place in the premises of the workplace or office of the school or training institution, in any place where the parties were found as a result of work education or training responsibilities or relations. Third is at work or education or training related social functions, while on official business outside the office or school or training institution, or during work or school or training related travel, at official conferences, fora, symposia, or training sessions, or by telephone, cellular phone, fax machine, or electronic mode. So, sexual harassment happens siya any place, anywhere, basta ma-related siya sa sexual harassment. So, forms of sexual harassment are physical, when a malicious touching, overt sexual advances, gestures with lewd insinuations, and second is verbal, such as but not limited to request or demand for sexual favors and lurid remarks. Visual, when use of objects, pictures or graphics, letters or written notes with sexual underpinnings, and other forms of analogous to the foregoing. And sabotable naman na siya, so that are the forms of sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is not only unlawful, but it is also damaging, emotional injuries and financial impact to each and everyone who's experiencing a sexual harassment. Emotional injuries, because victims may uh, victims those victims of the said sexual harassment may feel powerless, or leading to self-esteem. Yes, makakapil sila ana kay dili sila ka voice out sa unsa ilahang na feel, and mentally kuan sila, mentally unstable, or ma-trauma sila sa mga nahitabo. And for the financial impact, it is because the victim may resisted the offer of his supervisor's sexual harassment or sexual requests, and tungod ana na denied iyahang promotions or kanang makapataas niya og rangko sa iyahang trabaho, and wanting pod kay mo quit sa ilahang job na makakos og financial impact sa ilaha. So whatever form of sexual harassment takes, it is essential that it is acknowledged, and that action is taken against the harasser as soon as possible. It is extremely important also to prevent sexual harassment and to take necessary efforts or action to deal with this sexual harassment that does occur. So that's all for lesson 21, and once again, I am Reahlyn Vormittag. Thank you and God bless.